Howdy folks, welcome back to War Thunder with the mighty Jingles. It's been a while since I put an aerial War Thunder video up. I've been focusing on some of the ground forces on the test server, but I haven't shown you much dogfighting in War Thunder aircraft for a while. And I have to give you your credit. Your War Thunder fans, you've been a lot more patient than the World of Tanks fans. It's not until lately that people have been asking Jingles where are all the War Thunder videos. I can skip one day of putting a World of Tanks video up and somebody's like, oh, this channel sucks, there's no World of Tanks videos anymore. That doesn't happen with War Thunder. And the short and simple reason why you haven't seen much in the way of War Thunder content is because I just haven't had anything worth showing you. You know, if I ever play a game of War Thunder and it's worth putting up on the channel, you'll get War Thunder videos. Unfortunately, for the last 2 weeks, every game I've played has sucked. I rarely finish a battle in War Thunder. I just quit in disgust a couple of minutes in due to the way. Well, is it my own fault for playing arcade battles? Yes, it probably is. But you know, when you jump into your shooting star, your brand new aircraft, and the first thing that happens is you get set on fire and burned to death when a bomber so much as looks at you, it kind of kills your enthusiasm for persisting with the rest of the match. And it does get really tiring being the only one climbing to high altitude and going after these bombers. But I think I've figured out why nobody else is doing it, and why games are ending in minutes as the bombers just base rush and bomb their way to victory. First of all, it's bloody dangerous. B-17s and yours in particular, and don't get me started about the massed 20mm guns on some of the higher tier Japanese bombers. The British are pushovers, the German bombers suck as well, but American, Russian and Japanese bombers, it's bloody dangerous going after them. Even an aircraft that was specifically designed to shoot them down. So, if you're flying a fighter in a War Thunder arcade battle, you've got two choices. Go after the enemy bombers, or don't go after the enemy bombers. If you choose to not go after the enemy bombers, then the match is going to be over in the next 4 minutes. But you may still get some kills, and get some credits, and some research points out of it. If you choose to go after the enemy bombers, here's what is likely to happen. If the enemy bomber that you're going for is either Japanese or American, worst case scenario, he's just going to kill you. Whether or not you're able to do any critical damage to him before that happens is just a question of how good a shot you are. But the chances are he's still going to be able to continue flying, carry out his mission, drop his bombs. Best case scenario, well, you'll shoot him down without taking any damage. Realistically, one of you is going to go down, but even if he's the one who goes down, his 50 caliber, or if he's Japanese, 20mm guns are going to do so much damage to your airframe, or knock your engine out, that you're going to be no threat to the remaining bombers at that altitude. So that's the Americans and the Japanese. Very, very well defended, heavily armed bombers. Very dangerous to go after. Now, if the bombers you're going after are German or British, they're no threat. They really, really aren't. They're a complete pushover. Their defensive armament is pathetic. So what they tend to do is the second they see you getting within firing range, they just go into a dive. So now you have to make another choice. Because if you dive after this guy, you've just thrown away all that time that you spent climbing to this altitude in the first place. And all of the other bombers that aren't going into a dive, because you're not within gunnery range of them yet, they're free to carry on and just end the game in the next 3 minutes. And if you do dive after the guy who went into the dive, there's no guarantee you're going to get that kill anyway, because he's just dived down right into all the rest of your fighters, and they all look up and say, oh, British bomber, easy kill. And in situations like this, the biggest danger to you, because you chose to go and dive after a British bomber, is your own team. Most of the fire I took in that encounter came from friendly aircraft, shooting through me to get to that fat, juicy British bomber who went into a dive. In a War Thunder arcade battle, one of the most dangerous places you can find yourself in a fighter is at low altitude on the tail of an enemy bomber. Now, being on the tail of a B-17 is a dangerous proposition in the first place, but he's not the major threat. The major threat is reckless dickheads like that BF-109 pilot who fired through me to get to him. The people on your own team scrambling after you to fight for the scraps of the bomber that you just spent the last 3 to 4 minutes forcing down to this altitude in the first place. And if they're not going right through you to get at the target that you are just about to shoot down, well, they'll just fly into them so that you don't even get an assist out of it. And so I'm rapidly coming to understand why it is that I consistently always seem to be the only person on my team going after the enemy bombers at high altitude, because it's just not worth the effort. If you don't get shot down by the bomber's defensive armament, and there's a good chance you will, then he's just going to go into a dive, and then your own team become the most dangerous thing on the battlefield. Have a look at this B-17. Look at how many people see, oh, bomber, low altitude, and then just... I'm not going anywhere near that. It's just too dangerous. War Thunder arcade ground strike matches. It's just pointless going after the enemy bombers. There are too many of them. There's not enough of you going after them. It's too dangerous going after them. All you succeed in doing is forcing them down to low altitude where the rest of your team poses a bigger threat to you than the bombers do in the first place. And after a couple of weeks of this, it eventually stopped surprising me. And I came to understand why most people do not bother climbing after the bombers in a War Thunder arcade ground strike map. Well, most people don't do it because they're lazy and stupid. But those of us who did try to make a difference and try to intercept the enemy bombers have just stopped doing it because it's a waste of your time. If you want to earn lines and research points as a fighter pilot in an arcade ground strike map, don't waste your time going after the bombers. Farm ground kills. Go after the enemy fighters, because they're all going to be at low altitude with you. None of them are going after your bombers either. War Thunder arcade ground strike matches are decided by who has the most efficient bombers, or who has the most bombers. There's no subtlety in it, it's just whose bombers make the most of their bomb load on the enemy base. Gaijin have attempted to address the utter dominance of heavy bombers by increasing the amount of hit points that bases have in higher tier games, but since nobody is trying to shoot the bombers down in the first place, it all boils down to who can deliver their bombs to the enemy base the fastest. Nothing has changed, it just takes the bombers slightly longer. Games are now over in 5 or 6 minutes instead of 3 or 4 minutes. My repair cost in this match, flying the Lancaster of all things, this thing only has 3 gun turrets. Anybody can shoot this thing down. My repair costs in this were nil. I just flew around the map, dropping my 4,000 pound bombs on the enemy base over and over and over. Nobody at any point climbed to altitude and even tried to shoot me down. And Lancasters are not difficult to shoot down. Nobody bothered, because in the time it would have taken them to climb to my bombing altitude, I would have gotten 2 bombing runs off on their base, and even if they had shot me down, there were another 6 bombers on my team doing exactly the same thing, and I would have just jumped into a Wellington and done it all again. In fact, in the length of time it would have taken me to get to the bombing point in the Wellington, the game would have been over anyway. It's a waste of time going after bombers, and that's why nobody does it. And so, this is the most successful game of War Thunder I have played in 2 weeks, and all I did was fly circles around the enemy base, pressing the spacebar twice every 35 seconds or so. Gee, that was fun. And, you know, I'm sitting here thinking, where did it all go so wrong? I used to have so much fun playing War Thunder arcade battles. I absolutely loved it. These days, playing as a fighter, all you're doing is fighting over the scraps at low altitude before the bombers end the mission. And playing as a bomber is about as exciting and interesting as grinding your daily missions in World of Warcraft. It's an efficient way of farming XP and credits. You can't really argue with numbers like that. But it's boring as shit. So I'm just done with War Thunder Arcade. It's a real shame because it used to be so exciting. But it's just an exercise in futility these days. So I'll be sticking to realistic battles from now on. And there are going to be people out there who are going to be very happy to hear that I'm not going to be playing arcade anymore and I'm going to stick to realistic battles. But at the same time, putting War Thunder arcade battle videos up is what basically grew my whole War Thunder audience. So there are going to be a lot of people out there who are going to be upset to hear this. But I just can't do it anymore. I am so utterly sick and tired of the greed, stupidity, recklessness, selfishness, and now the utter pointlessness of playing War Thunder Arcade in the state that it's in at the moment. So it's realistic battles for me from here on in. Of course the challenge now is for me to fly some realistic battles in which I A, don't suck, and B, produce something worth watching on YouTube, so that's going to be difficult. But it's a challenge that I am actually looking forward to. So, watch your 6, and I will catch you next time. Just won't be in an arcade battle.